Hi everyone, it is time for my September wrap-up. I have decided to switch it up again. We are back to sit-down wrap-ups. I'm reading a lot less each month than I was at the beginning of the year. So since my number of books has come down from the 20 plus I used to read every month to about 10 every month, I figured it would just be easier to just sit down and talk about them because it wasn't an astronomical number. We're going to give this a try for a little while. I may switch it up again. Wrap-ups are one of those things where I'm constantly changing it every 6 to 8 months of how I do it. I don't know why. It's just what happens. So in the month of September, I read 9 books. I did spend 6 days reading Mistborn and did not finish it in the month. So you will see that in my October wrap up. So that did take away a lot of reading, which I think is why I didn't quite crack double digits last month, is I took a long time to read a book that didn't actually get finished. And I always count books in the month that I finish them, not the month that I start. This resulted in 3,992 pages read. Let's jump in and see what books they are. I've got them sorted from least favorite to most favorite. So that's how we're going to go through this list. I did not really have any glaringly bad reads this month. My lowest scoring book is a 3-star. So I had a pretty good reading month for enjoyment wise. That being said, my only 3-star read this month was My Brain is Different by Monzuzu. I really wanted to love this manga, and there were things about it I really did like and things that I think could have been done better. This book follows 9 true stories from 9 separate individuals who are neurospicy. And I was really excited to see that in a manga, and I did really like that it tackled the different struggles that people growing up a little bit neurospicy do have. I also found it really interesting to look at it through a different cultural lens. Obviously, this is Japan that we're talking about and how their culture views developmental disorders. And that was really interesting because there definitely is a difference in the cultural way that these things are viewed. I did find that the stories, however, were quite repetitive as we went through. And in the end, they talked about a lot of stories that they didn't include in the book. And I think some of those should have been. They were a bit different. And instead of focusing on the same thing over and over, it would have been nice to see a variety of different stories. Please check your trigger warnings when going into this. I thought I could tackle this in an afternoon and quickly realized that was not the case. I could really only read 1 or 2 stories before I had to put it down. It was very heavy, so please check trigger warnings before going into this book. I think overall the concept is really good, and that's how it got a 3-star rating for me. Then I had one 3.5-star rated book, and that is Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan. This is the 5th book in the Wheel of Time series. These books are really starting to run together in my mind because I'm reading them back to back to back to back to back. I know exactly what's going on in the story, but if you were to ask me what book something happened in, I don't necessarily think I could. It's just been one big Wheel of Time event at this point. That being said, this one definitely picked up the story in a much faster pace than book 4 did, thankfully. Book 4 was rough for me. I gave it 2 stars. So I'm really glad that I'm starting to enjoy this story again. Obviously, I cannot talk about anything that is happening in this book at this point. It is so many pages in and definitely spoilers, but this book did much better than the last, and I'm already into book 6 and enjoying that even more. So we're starting to head in the right direction again. Still, my favorite book in this series is book 3. It's my only 5-star read in the series, but I'm interested to see what I feel like of the series overall when I finish. Now I have a large stack of 4-star reads. I had a lot of 4-star reads in the month of September, which is great. 4 stars is a fantastic rating. So let's start with the first one, and that is Tanya French's The Searcher. This book I read for my book haul reaction You Picked It vote. You all voted for me to read this book. I also read this as part of Leandra from Leandra the TBR Zero's Patreon book club for the month. It was really exciting to participate in a Patreon book club. I tend not to be able to because I really can't deviate from my TBR too much. The fates just aligned that I could read this with them. In this book, we follow Cal. Cal is a police detective. He is in Ireland. He used to live in Chicago. He's now retired and has moved to this small Irish village. In this village, he meets Trey, who is a little boy in the town, and Trey comes to him and says, my brother is missing. My brother has gone missing. No one is looking. Can you help me find my brother, Brendan? Cal does agree to help Trey after a little bit of convincing, and we definitely see the mentorship between Cal and Trey in this book. That is a big part of this book. This book is a mystery. We do finally find out where Brendan is, what happened to make him not be there anymore. But the main plot of this book, I think, is really following Cal, his life prior to when he came. We get little glimpses of that, of what brought him to Ireland, and him moving forward and using this relationship with Trey to maybe mend some things in his past that he thinks should have gone differently. It really is an interesting mix of contemporary fiction and mystery. I had a good time with it. It was very slow going, so go into this knowing that it's a very slow, meandering plot. I did not mind that because I went in knowing that, and I did have the audio. I think physically reading this would have been a little bit of a challenge. I did really enjoy the small town vibes in this book. The small town and the setting, this Irish small town setting, really is almost a character in this book, and it lended so much to the atmosphere of this book. I would definitely recommend, and I did say in the vlog that I didn't think I'd be continuing with the series, but my library just reopened and I did get a copy of the book from my library, so I may continue. I may have changed my mind. My next 4-star read was The Night That Ends With Fire by KX Song. This is a Mulan retelling. I really did enjoy this book. I really liked it at the beginning. The 100 pages after about the 30-page point was a little bit slow for me, but then it kicked into gear and I devoured the second half of this book. This is a Mulan retelling, so you will definitely know kind of the general idea of what this story is. It follows Mei Lin. Mei Lin's father is addicted to opium, and he basically sells her off to the highest bidder as a fiance to get married for her dowry. This fiance is an old man. He's had many wives who have all mysteriously died when they could not sire an heir, and she wants no part of this. So she runs away and joins the military. In this book, we find out that there is definitely a lot of magic in this society. There are dragons, and that was the part that did pick up in the second half of this book, and I think that's why I enjoyed it even more. The first part of this book is definitely very military training, and it kind of felt a little bit repetitive, but once we kicked into the actual magic system and the different relationships going on, I was sold. There is definitely some fantasy romance vibes in this as well, with a couple of love interests, and I'm intrigued to see how that plays out in the sequel, because there is a love interest I definitely am rooting for over the other one, as there is a love triangle. I do not know when the next book is coming out, but I will definitely be picking it up, and I really hope it has beautiful sprayed edges like this one so that they can both look gorgeous on my shelves together. Whiskey Business by Elliot Fletcher is a contemporary romance that I picked up sheerly for the cover, and I'm so glad that I did. I really loved the vibes of this book. I loved the banter between our two main characters, and I really just enjoyed my ride with this. I read this book so quickly. It was such an easy read, and it was a nice kind of breather between a couple of fantasy books. In this book, we follow April. April is an actress. She's actually quite an A-list actress until something kind of happens in her career that makes her have to take a step back. Her grandparents who raised her, they pass away and leave her this distillery, and she has to go home and just kind of see what needs to happen at the distillery. She finds it kind of in a state of issues due to many, many reasons, and decides to chip in to fix up the distillery and get it running again and make it a success. She has to work with the distiller, who is basically the main staff member of this distillery, who is Malcolm McCabe. Malcolm is this grumpy Scottish guy. He definitely does not love that April is coming in and changing up everything on him. He has some anxiety, very much untreated anxiety at the start of this book, and all these changes are definitely causing him to be a little bit panicky. We do have some mental health rep in this book, and we do follow his journey with his anxiety a little bit. It's not necessarily a main plot, but it's definitely in there. And I really, really did like their romance and their relationship. This also has those small town vibes that you know I love, and I just loved the small town in and of itself. This is going to have 2 sequels that I'm definitely going to be reading following Malcolm's brothers, and I can't wait for those to come out as well. My only warning with this book is it's very heavy on the pet names. If you don't like pet names in your romance and you don't like a lot of it, I would probably steer clear of this, but I did not mind it. Then we have my first romance that I had to read for the Every Romantasy Challenge. Rainey got me to read this book for Every Romantasy for the Bodyguard romance prompt. Now, I will say, I do think this is more of a cozy fantasy than a fantasy romance. I can see how it is also a fantasy romance because obviously there is quite a large romance subplot. But I do feel like it really does lean heavily into the cozy fantasy, and that may be why I loved it so much. We'll see as the challenge goes on. In this book, we follow Hala, and Hala has been living with her husband's uncle after her husband passed away. She's lived there for years, and now he has passed away. She has been given his house and basically everything as part of the inheritance. Her husband's family is not happy about this because obviously that takes all that money out of the family because Hala is no longer really connected to the family in any way. They decide to try to force her to marry her husband's cousin to keep the inheritance in the family. They even lock her in a room basically to force this to happen. Hala unsheaths a sword from the wall, and when she unsheaths this decorative sword, a man pops out of it, and he is her bodyguard, and he is going to get her away from this family, get her to someone who can help her sort out this inheritance, basically a lawyer. And we see that happen in this book. We see them kind of go on a journey to find a lawyer that will help them. We see the lawyer kind of coming back to help them, and we go on this whole journey together. I absolutely adored Hala. Hala is an older protagonist, not old by any means, but she's in her 30s, which made her just a little bit more mature than some of these early 20-year-old protagonists we tend to see in fantasy romance. She also was very sarcastic. She had these little aside comments in her head that I absolutely loved to see. And the banter between her and the main character, who is Sarkis, that's his name. I read this at the start of September, so I was forgetting. The banter between her and Sarkis is great. They're definitely coming from two separate worlds. He's been locked in a sword for hundreds of years. We also have a character that joins up about halfway through. Won't go too in detail about that character, but it is Zale. And Zale and Hala's friendship is so fabulous. I absolutely love them together. I love them. They are both so inquisitive about the world, and I just loved their outlook on the world, and seeing them converse together about how things work and question things together was so fun to watch and read. I'm very happy that the first Every Romantasy book was a win at 4 stars. My last 4-star read of the month was The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Dernst. This was my Patreon buddy read for the months of September and October. I got it done early. I've got the beautiful lavender sprayed edges. In this book, we follow a librarian, Keela, and Keela is in the library with her spider plant, Kaz, who, yes, can talk. We all love Kaz. When the library is set aflame by the people of this rebellion trying to overthrow, I think it's the Emperor. Could be wrong about the exact title of this leader. She grabs as many spell books as she can from the library, gets in a boat, and takes off into the water to protect the books. Her and Kaz go back to this tiny island in which Keela was raised. Her parents left there when she was about 7 or 8 to take her to the city for a bigger life, and she returns to Caltray. Caltray is one of the most magical little towns that you could ever be on. There is a lot of small town books in my September reads. I keep bringing up small towns, and I'm loving every minute of this small town life that I'm having. There are unicorns, there are spirit bears of the forest, there are mer horses, there are flying apple birds. There is a little bit of everything, and it is just so magical. But this town and a lot of the climate is currently struggling. Magic is something that has always kept the climate in control. And now with this rebellion and also the Emperor not really paying attention, the sorcerers who kept the weather systems and the plants growing and all the things that they need have not shown up to this little island. So the island is dying. Nature is dying. The storms are getting worse and worse and worse. It is illegal for regular people to do magic, but Keela has all these spell books, and she decides to help the people of Caltray and help the climate as a whole. The climate fiction in this book was absolutely my favorite part of this book. We also have a little bit of a romance between her and one of her childhood friends. That was not necessarily my favorite part of the book, but I did really enjoy it still. The only reason this didn't get 5 stars is there's a little bit of repetitiveness at the end between two almost repeating storylines. Since they happened at the very end of the book, I won't talk about them in depthly, but I did feel like only one of those storylines was necessary. The second one just felt like we were repeating the same thing over. Other than that, I really, really enjoyed this book and would highly recommend it to basically everybody. Then we had a 4.5 star book for The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. I am so excited to see Lucy Foley back with this murder mystery vibe from The Guest List. This really had the same style of The Guest List. If you love The Guest List, you will love The Midnight Feast. This is another one set on a very small island. Very small island. And the town has a lot of myths around what protects the town. We have some mythology around something called the birds, which we take the entire book to find out what that is. And it was so intriguing. We follow multiple perspectives and we watch Lucy Foley weave together this timeline. There's 3 timelines we follow, 5 perspectives, I think. And we see Lucy Foley just weave this all together and we find out little tidbits about each person that brings a little bit more to the story of what's going on here, how we got to this point of a dead body on the beach. We don't even know who's dead on the beach, but we know somebody is right from the get-go. And we see the events leading up to it, events from the past, events from now. And the way Lucy Foley weaves that all together to come to the end with this realization of what's going on is done so well. You can follow those threads and see where it comes. You're not going to get these big twists with a Lucy Foley book necessarily, but I don't really need that in a mystery because really a mystery, I feel like we should be unfolding the layers along with the author, and that's exactly what we did in this book. I don't want to go into details because there is barely any synopsis on the back of this book for a reason. This book is best to just go in blind, not really know what's happening with our characters, and discovering it as you go. I have one more book to talk to you about this month, and it was my only 5-star read, and it is a read that will go down in history as one of my favorite romance books, and that is, not surprisingly, Daydream by Hannah Grace. I have been highly anticipating this release since reading Icebreaker at the start of the year. Henry is one of my favorite characters from Icebreaker. I adore Henry, and I adore him as a character, and I just could not wait to see his romance. And it was in this book, but what I did not expect to see, which was one of my main takeaways from my vlog if you saw it, was how much I could fall in love with Hallie, our main character. Hallie is a people pleaser and she is struggling to put herself first in any situation. Henry definitely helps her do that. And we follow her kind of becoming a reformed people pleaser. She is so relatable. She is one of the most relatable characters I've ever read in a romance novel. Henry also has some neurospiciness going on, and we see the mental health rep in this book as well. Hannah Grace is so good at putting mental health rep in a book, and this was 5 stars. It's all the stars. I liked it more than Icebreaker, which is saying a lot because that was going to be on my best books of the year. Now they're going to have to share a space, which is fine. They can share a space together because I absolutely love them both for very different reasons, but also kind of for the same, I guess, because it is the mental health rep in both. It's just a little bit different. And just these female main characters that I can completely relate to. I do want to say this one is much less spicy than the first 2 books. The first 2 books are extremely spicy for contemporary romance. This one is barely spicy at all. So it's very, very different in that regard. But I think that worked for these characters and was really genuine to the story Hannah Grace was trying to write. So that is all 9 books that I read in the month of September. Obviously, Daydream being my favorite and the manga being my least favorite. Let me know what your favorite read of September was down in the comments down below. I would really like to know and maybe add some things to my list of books that I should get to soon. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.